Hello, welcome to the Lord of the Rings, the living card game. I'm the White Tower Watchman. So this video is going to be a simple rules video. I've always had this video on my bucket list for a long time. I just want to knock it out. It's not the most complicated concept in the world. I'm just going to talk about the empty encounter deck and what we do with it during the quest phase, etc. So there's a small rule in here that you may not know. I play wrong all the time. It's very easy to gloss over. It's hidden deep in the middle of the FAQ, and things aren't as simple as they may seem. So let's just go ahead and talk about this. Now, we know there's a rule in this game where if the encounter deck is ever empty, um, outside of the quest phase, nothing happens, right? You just have everything in the discard pile, and it can't really do anything. But there's just, you have to think of almost a constant effect that turns on, a passive effect the encounter deck has inside the quest phase, which is if the encounter deck's ever empty, you reshuffle the discard pile into it, right? And a lot of people have played this, including myself, over the years. Is it's like because we're thinking of it as a constant ability or a passive ability, it should have priority timing, which means, and even the rule book says you do it immediately anytime the encounter deck is empty. Okay, so it makes it seem as though it gets top priority over everything else. And that's the way I would venture to say most people play it. But there is this little entry in the FAQ that says there's some exceptions. So um, we're going to read this question and this answer. Now, keep in mind, this is one of those rare times where the question and answer create a side confusion because they're going to use some typos in here. Anytime they say the quest deck, what they're trying to talk about is the encounter deck. So both the question and the answer have that, unfortunately. But it says, question, when I reveal the last card in the encounter deck, do I immediately reset the encounter deck before resolving the staging of the revealed card? I think this was just a questioner that was like, maybe new to the game, or they just made a mistake there. And they're saying, the deck that I'm playing against, the quest, right? But the quest deck is actually a game term that means something totally different. And then to maybe help them understand, the answer use the exact same terminology. So they say, no, resolve the staging of the revealed card, including any when revealed effects, before resetting the quest deck, they mean encounter deck, if able. If you are unable to completely resolve the staging of the card because it instructs you to interact with the encounter deck in some manner, see, then they switch to the right term there, then reset the encounter deck and finish resolving the effect. So that all should mean encounter deck. That's very confusing that still exists in the FAQ like that. They're saying quest deck just like in a general term, like, oh, the deck that I'm playing against, the quest, the bad guy deck. They don't mean like the literal game term quest deck, right? Because it's something totally different. So this is telling you to finish the staging of the last card before you reshuffle everything. So in essence, it is a little contradictory to the concept that this is a constant ability that we immediately interrupt what we're doing and reshuffle the discard pile into the quest, the encounter deck. That's not exactly the case. And it's hard to think of it that way because we're always thinking in this game in terms of priority timings, passive effects, forced effects, responses, right? So you actually do finish the last card. And what that's going to ensure is that the last card goes in the discard pile before it all gets reshuffled together. Okay? A lot of people play this way on a few examples without even realizing it. For instance, we all know the rule about Eastern Crows in this Journey Along the Anduin. So let's say we were playing Journey Along the Anduin. I have Peril and Peligre set up here. In the entire Peril and Peligre is in the discard pile, and this is stage 3 of Peril and Peligre because that's what I want to talk about in a minute. But just for a moment, we're going to pretend we're on Journey Along to Anduin. And the last card is going to be the Eastern Crows. Thalin's questing. He has a passive ability that takes precedence over everything that says he deals damage to each enemy as it's revealed by the encounter deck. Let's say that last card is the Eastern Crows. It's going to take a damage. Now, because we resolve the staging of this card and anything to do with it before we reset this the discard pile, what's going to happen is we reveal the card. Before it enters the staging area, Thalin deals the damage. That's before its own surge, so it's not going to surge because it never entered play to trigger its abilities. So Thalin's going to destroy it before it surges. It does have a force effect that interacts with itself after it's destroyed, basically after it leaves play or before it. This is basically always on. It says after Eastern Crows is defeated, shuffle it back in the counter deck. So that's going to happen immediately. Okay, and then we're never going to reset the discard pile because now we have an encounter deck again as the staging of that, basically before the staging of that card was completed. So if you have Eastern Crows, there's 3 of them in Journey Along to Anduin. There's 3 of them in there. If you happen to put 1 or more on the bottom of the deck with Denethor, and you can get to the end of the encounter deck, and you don't deal shadow cards, you can lock the encounter deck for the rest of the game and just have Thalin questing. So this is how this rule works. So it keeps going back in, it keeps going in here, and it never surges because Thalin kills it before its surge takes effect. So that's going to be your reveal for the rest of the quest if you can pull that off. And then that means because we resolve that staging before we reset the discard pile, we'll keep getting the crows. That's how that works. So a lot of people, if you're playing with the correct crows rule, then you're playing with the correct, at least in that instance, you're playing with the correct reshuffling rule without even knowing about it. But it has to be uniform and consistent for the entire game. So we wouldn't do this with the crows if this was an immediate thing that came over before we finished the card. Because what would happen is we would reveal the crows, it would take the damage, but this would like interrupt everything else. Maybe even this, because it has the framework rule basically has the same timing as this if it's always on. And you could even make the argument that as soon as we flip the crows up and start to drag them over to our play area, this is already back in here, and then Thalin destroys it. That's not how it works. You finish the staging of this card, which includes Thalin destroying it and it getting reshuffled, and then we never reset the discard pile. So that's pretty simple, right? Now let's make things a little more complicated. Let's do Signs of Conflict. This is just, I wanted a simple card with Surge on it to show what happens when a card does Surge and it's the last card. So let's say we're in Into the Pit and the last card, Thalin's questing, is Signs of Conflict. So you're going to reveal the Treachery, Doom 2, so you're going to raise your threat by 2, and then Surge. So we have an empty deck here, but you finish the staging of this card. So it sets up the Surge, goes to the discard pile, we reshuffle everything, including the Signs of Conflict, and then we reveal another card. Okay? Alright, so now let's get into some weird ones, okay? So let's say I'm on Peril in Peligre, and I'm on the last stage. I'm trying to get out of here. This actually came up in my playthrough, and this is what made me want to do this video, because it's just a good opportunity to talk about all these little weird last encounter card rules. So it says, Forced. The first enemy revealed from the encounter deck each round makes an immediate attack against the player who controls Alcaron's Scroll from the staging area. Okay, so let's say, and that's from the staging area, which means it has to have entered play. We have to have completed the staging before the forced effect goes off. So, which we'll get into more later, that sometimes enemies attack you before they enter the staging area. Like, for instance, Crazy Cobb, when revealed, this enemy attacks a character with the most poison attached. That's before he even hits the staging area. That's while he's in that little limbo, right? So that's different. But this is the first enemy revealed from the encounter deck. Each round makes an immediate attack against the player who controls Alcaron's Skull from the staging area. So we do everything with the enemy, we get him in the staging area, and then we do the attack. So let's say with Thalin's questing again, the last enemy is Zealous Trader. The last card is an enemy. It's Zealous Trader. He takes damage from Thalin as he comes off the deck. He goes here. Now, we have no encounter deck, and he's about to make an attack. Well, this rule tells us if you're unable to completely resolve the staging of the card because it instructs you to interact with the encounter deck in some manner, then reset the quest deck and finish resolving the effect. So then we would shuffle all this back in. Let's say we do. Let's just pretend like we shuffle all this back in. And then we deal it a shadow card, okay? So that's simple. Now, here's where things get a little weird, and I'm like 99% sure, but I'm not 100% sure. Let's say in this situation, this is our board state, and we got 2 cards left. Okay, we're questing with Thalin. Okay, we reveal a card. It's the Zealous Trader. He takes the damage. He goes to the staging area. Now, this forced effect is still technically part of the staging of this card. So we're not done yet. So we deal it a shadow card. Okay? Because we're still staging this card, okay, it is very possible that we do not reset this deck until the entire attack is over. However, I think because there's a break and now you have like that action window, I would 100% venture to guess that Caleb would say, go ahead and reset the deck here. Okay? This one could kind of go either way. If we're playing by exactly how it's written, we resolve the entire staging of this card and everything that has to do with it, including the attack, because that forced effect is part of the staging of this card. Okay? But because we're splitting extreme, like we're getting into grains of sand here, we're like splitting extreme hairs. This is kind of one of those that I would think the designer would say, go ahead and reshuffle this right now. We've got a break. There's an action window. This should probably be reshuffled already. Okay. The only thing that's going to matter is this card and this card. Basically the only difference is this card and this card going to be in the encounter deck our next time through it or not? Okay. Because if we finish the whole staging of the card, including the forced effect, I could defend with the Gondorian Spearman, or I could defend with Baragond and the Spear of the Citadel. Either one of these. Even if Thalin wasn't questing and he didn't take a damage, and I had a Gondorian Spearman with the Spear of the Citadel, this would work. This is generally the strategy I use against these guys and on this particular quest. But let's say we had Thalin here. He's got 1 damage. Gondorian Spearman defends. He does damage. This is immediately destroyed. It goes in the discard pile. The question is, if there's 2 cards left in this exact situation, you're going to get in these weird situations, right? In this particular corner case, where you have an attack with 1 extra card left for the shadow effect, then the deck is empty after the shadow card is dealt, and then the forced effect goes off. Is this all still considered part of the staging of the card? Because if so, he would die, go to the discard pile, and then finally we would reshuffle, which I think is like by the book how it goes. But again, because you have such a big break there with that action window opening up, I wouldn't be surprised if that was one where the designer wanted you to go ahead and shuffle that all in, then go ahead and finish that there. Okay? The only difference would be these 2 cards, are they in the deck or not your second time through? And most playthroughs, I mean, if you really want to split hairs, and you want to play by the book, then this is you would leave the discard pile there, finish this attack, and then even if you didn't have the Spear of the Citadel and you just did like a regular defender or whatever, like let's say he defended without the Spear of the Citadel, the shadow card would end up going to the discard pile, and then it would all get in that case, the shadow card would go to the discard pile while everything was in it. Then it would get reshuffled, and then we would just have this board state right here. But if you did have the Spear of the Citadel or the Gondorian Spearman, they'd finish him off. Basically, if somehow this guy dies from the attack, right? Sneak attack, Gandalf, and the action window, then it all goes to the discard pile, and then it gets reshuffled in. And then the other question, this is where I'm only 99% sure, and why I'm not 100% sure, is this forced effect part of the staging, or once it hits the staging and begins the attack, is this all reshuffled? And then this technically all this forced effect here is not part of the staging. This is one of those weird ones because it really does kind of go either way. Sometimes in the rules, I've heard the designer say like everything to do with all the responses and forced effects that trigger off of something happening is all part of it, right? But then I think I read somewhere that once the attack starts, and I'd have to really dig to find this, but I remember vaguely reading that like once the attack begins, the staging that like is considered to be done, and you have that break with the action window, and this would all get shuffled. So we're really splitting hairs here. This is just for people who want to like deeply analyze this concept. But I would go ahead and consider this, if it was me just my gut would consider that forced effect triggering off him entering play as part of the staging, and you still wouldn't reshuffle the discard pile until that attack is over. But then again, I could be wrong about that, and as soon as the attack begins, maybe you reshuffle the discard pile. Okay, but anyway, enough on that. I do want to touch on one thing in this, just while we're talking about it. The difference between like these attacks. So we'll get to these two guys in a second, but this says, the first enemy revealed from the encounter deck each round makes an immediate attack against the player controls Alcaron scroll from the staging area. Okay, so that's saying he enters play. Now when a location or enemy enters play, it goes through a few processes. It comes off, it kind of enters a limbo, it does any when revealed effects. In this case, it gets hit by Thalin. Then it enters the staging area, then it does this. Okay? This attack. Okay? So another guy who's like that is Harajim Elite. It says when he enters play, it makes an immediate attack against staging area against the first player. So that's not a when revealed, it's a force, which implies he comes all the way in play, he enters the staging area, then he attacks. Okay? Now conversely, Crazy Cobb is a when revealed. So he comes off the top of the encounter deck, he attacks you like in limbo. He's not in the staging area yet, so you can't quick strike with Dune here. And then, after he does his attack, shadow card, somebody defends, whatever happens. After he does that, then he goes to the staging area. So that's the difference between an attack from a when revealed, because he's attacking from that little limbo, and an attack like this guy, or somebody in Peril and Peligear with this forced effect here. Okay? And I might as well mention, just to make this video, otherwise there wasn't really much to talk about, so I might as well just throw a little more information here. This guy had a weird ruling. So it says when Harajim Elite enters play, it makes an immediate attack from the staging area against the first player. So the way this is designed, the designers at the time didn't account for possibly this guy entering play, but not into the staging area, just engaging you. So if, like, let's say you play the Hunter. So you played Dunedain Hunter. After Dunedain Hunter enters play, search the top 5 cards in counter deck for a non-unique enemy and put it in play engaged with you. If no enemy enters play by this effect, discard him. So let's say you search top 5 and you want to pull this guy out for some weird reason. I wouldn't do that, but you want to do that. He enters play engaged with you, but when he enters play, he makes an attack from the staging area. So the way this card was designed and intended to work is anytime he enters play, he attacks you, and the attack is considered to be originating from the staging area. So while he's attacking you, so while he enters play engaged with you from the Dunedain Hunter, he is attacking you from the staging area while engaged with you. So he's simultaneously, at least until the end of the attack, he is engaged with you and attacking you from the staging area. Which means I believe you can quick strike Dune here while he's engaged with you and get a +1. But that's just that little extra trivia I threw on there, since I wanted to just throw a couple little extra tidbits in this video, since otherwise it was pretty simple. But anyway, that's the rules video for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, this one's not necessarily for everybody. This is I hope everybody enjoys this, but I understand this one's kind of granular. This is very like rules geek level. We're absolutely splitting hairs here. It's just something I had on my bucket list for a while, and I wanted to kind of get out of the way. So thanks for watching. See you next time.